Welcome to this afternoon's potpourri lecture by Mossi White. I think you'll all be very repaid for coming. We'll begin by just making a couple of announcements. First of all, we want to remind you of our annual spring scholarship and luncheon on April 5th. That's a Tuesday. And former Governor Gary Herbert is going to be speaking. Kyle Reyes, UVU ballroom dancers, scholarship recipients, and more dancers, Polynesian dancers. We will have tickets available at our March Teacher Appreciation Luncheon next Tuesday. So if you don't get them there, you can get tickets from any member of the board. We just hope that you'll mark it on your calendars and join. The Friday movie this week is Fly Away Home. That will be down in the basement of the Orem Library. And we have another special Elder Quest day trip, only in this case, it will be an evening trip. It will be on Tuesday, April 19th at 7:30. That will be the Utah Symphony doing Sherlock Holmes and the Case of the Missing Maestro. Sounds interesting. And that will be at the Nordstrom building on UVU campus. And don't forget to sign up for the Shakespeare trip or the Logan trip. We need to get those people signed up who can go because they have to be getting tickets. And if they don't get enough people signed, then they will just have to cancel. So think carefully, look at your calendars and sign up to join us for a couple of great trips this summer. I think that covers the announcements. So now I have been given the opportunity to introduce you to Mossi White. I have had the pleasure of knowing Mossi for, I counted up, 50 years. We're getting old, Mossi. I was very fortunate to move into the LDS ward that she was living in with her family. 50 years ago. Mossi is an extraordinary person who has accomplished so much in her life. I don't want to talk about what she will talk about as she tells you about her life, but let me just share a couple of things. Mossi was born in Norway, came to the United States as a young woman, has raised 3 very accomplished daughters. Her oldest daughter is a professor of law at BYU Law School. Sharon, who is here with her today, is an attorney in Provo, and their youngest daughter, Kirsten, is a counselor in the UVU Counseling Center. So not only has Mossi done great things herself, but she has raised great children. And just a couple of things that Mossi has done. Mossi, I think I've always felt that Mossi was just a natural born speaker. And I've been blessed to be able to hear her speak on a number of occasions. In addition to that, and to raising her children, being a great wife for her husband, Joe White, who was originally from Spanish Fork, but served for many, many years in the motion picture studio department at BYU. But Mossi has done remarkable things herself. She has served as president of the Provo School Board Association, went on to serve as president of the Utah School Board Association. And then, as if that wasn't enough, went on to serve as president of the National School Board Association. And I remember Mossi telling me at one time that during the time she was national president, she visited, I think she said, all 50 states and spoke in every state. I don't want to detract time from Mossi, so let me introduce you to my very good friend and a remarkable lady, Mossi White.
Thank you so much, Marjane. You are most kind, and I love you dearly. It's nice to be with you here today, and I chose for today's lecture to talk about this land, which is my land. And as you were just told, I am from Norway. And I was announcing that I was on my way in the first few days after World War II had broken out in Norway. And my father was a military in the Norwegian army, so he was out fighting the invading army. And my mother had gone to her parents' home, which was about half an hour by car outside of Bergen, the second largest city and the largest harbor in Norway, and to spend a few days with them when, as I said, I decided to announce that I was about to arrive. It was evening. It was in the middle of an air raid attack. There were no phone connections. And my grandfather decided with my uncle that they were going to drive into town and find a doctor or a nurse who would come. So there was total blackout, so they couldn't have the headlights on the car. So my grandfather drove with a candle lit on the dashboard, if you can imagine, and was driving ever so slowly to make sure he stayed on the road. When they got into town, the air attack was vicious, and they could find no one in the medical profession who cared one bit that a baby was on the way, because they were dealing with people who had been hit by bombs and who were severely suffering. So they were just going, oh, pshaw, a baby birth, that's just normal, go and take care of it yourself. So my grandfather got back in the car and drove back to his home.
Here.
On the way.
I gotta go to.
You okay? On the way, the bombs were starting to fall on the road where they were driving. So at one point they stopped and sought refuge in a cemetery behind some tombstones. And when they decided it was safe to get out from there, they found that my grandfather's car was peppered with shrapnel. Well, they got back to my grandfather's home with a cheerful message for my poor little grandma that she was going to be the doctor, the nurse, and the midwife. And I arrived into this world at the very moment that our neighbor's house was flattened by bombs. And because of that, my grandfather gave me the nickname of Bombardine, which translates as the girl bomb. Now, I am telling you this because I would like you to think about what it would be like being worried about your daughter being in labor, being worried about bombs falling around you, being worried about that there was a total blackout, so there wasn't a light in sight anywhere, and you were driving with a candle on your dashboard, and then to find that there was no one who could come and help, and you were returning back to find that this birth was going to be in your hand. Now, Norway has been judged for years to be one of the most livable countries in the world. They have the highest living standards. It is a wonderful place to live. And yet what I was just telling you happened to 2 generations in that country of what they experienced. And so what I am hoping as you're thinking about this is that you will feel gratitude for this country, because we have been so blessed to not have those experiences on our soil. So said, my mother and my grandmother experienced 2 world wars on their soil. How blessed are we in this land? And gratitude, to me, is a vital part of our lives, or it certainly should be. The first time I heard of this country was in my first year in school. And my school got a care package from a school in this country. And I got a package of chiclets and a package of bubble gum. I had never seen such treasures. And I walked around that whole day in school clutching those treasures while I was repeating to myself over and over again so I wouldn't forget it. United States of America, land of the bubble gum. It seemed to me that a land where they had bubble gum was a fairy tale country where all good things could happen and dreams could come true. I later learned, as I studied about this country, that that was in fact true, albeit not because of the bubble gum, but because of how this country was founded to become the United States of America. I was in awe as I learned about our founding fathers and how, as they left their countries, burned all bridges behind them as they came to form this new bubblegum country where dreams could come true for those who came here. As I studied their actions, I realized how many times we should have failed. This country should, by all bets, have failed time and time again. Oh, we were given a lot of opportunities to fail, but we didn't. And instead, we grew to become the most powerful country in the world. And I fully believe that the reason we succeeded was because those founding generations, yes, they had disagreements, but they worked together for a common goal of what was good for us. What was good for us was what was driving them as they were overcoming and working through their disagreements to come to the foundation of this country. And I just have this as a side note to tell you that the best marital advice I ever got was, if two people agree on everything, one of them is unnecessary. And sometimes we get scared of disagreements, but disagreements in fact are good because they make us look at all angles, all sides, and makes us work through the obstacles and the things that separates us. And so this wonderful land of bubblegum was founded. And oh, how grateful we need to be for the gift that was given to us by those who gave their all, up to and including their lives, that this country would become the land of bubblegum. And that heritage of what they founded has been passed on to lucky you and me. And in addition, you and I who live in wonderful Utah were given the Mormon pioneer heritage to add to the land of bubblegum. I am in awe of our pioneer forefathers and what they sacrificed, how hard they worked to make this state as wonderful as it is. I remember the first time I visited Nauvoo, and I was walking down the Trail of Tears. And I sobbed all the way down that trail as I was reading the little mini histories of what they were experiencing and what they had given up as they were trekking to come to found this wonderful state, part of the fairy tale country. I remember reading one very special little history there about a woman who was giving up and being chased out of her third home. And she had loved this third house in Nauvoo. It was her dream house. I don't know how big it was. I don't know how majestic it was, but it was her dream home. And now she was going to have to leave again. And she said, she took her broom and she swept every floor in that house to leave it totally clean and spick and span. And then she walked out and closed the door behind her and started her trek west. I cried and cried, and do you know why I cried? Because I was feeling so strongly that I would have wanted to go out in the yard, pick up all the dirt I could find and sling it around walls and floors in that house. But no, That's not who she was. That's not who they were. She was leaving it, showing what kind of a person she was. And she left it immaculate for those who essentially were going to steal it out from under her, as she once again, and for the fourth time, went to the unknown and to start all over again. I have loved thinking about my husband's great-grandmother, great-great-grandmother, who frankly had a rotten life. As I have read her story, it's awful. It is just plain awful. But at the end of her life, she said, my life has been so good. And my only wish would have been that I could have had more schooling. I think about that. I reread what happened to her in her life. And I say, Mossi, wow, are you a spoiled brat? But in the midst of all of her trials and the bad things that happened to her, she had obviously to be able to say, I have had a good life. She had found the things for which to be grateful. And so therefore she could say, I have had a good life. And I love that in the midst of all of those trials, the thing that she wished that she had had was more education. I love that about her. And so here we have again been given a wonderful, wonderful gift, a heritage. You and I were invited when the table was set. That is a Norwegian expression. When the table has been set, the food has been prepared, everything is ready for the feast, and all you have to do is sit down and enjoy. And I know that I have certainly enjoyed. We were invited guests to this feast, the feast of the land of bubblegum, the gift that so many sacrificed for to give to us. So do we just get to enjoy this feast? I think not. I think there are two things that are absolutely attached to this blessing that we have had. And that is, we owe gratitude. We owe gratitude to those who have founded and provided that gift for us. And we absolutely owe that we make sure that the gift of the land of bubblegum is handed on to all future generations in this country. It must be as good a gift for our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren as it was for us. And today, as I look at my land of bubblegum, it isn't quite what it was when I first clutched those treasures in my hand. And I wonder what happened. I was here. It was on my watch. And I think that very slowly and imperceptibly, we changed from being a society of what is good for us to what is good for me. Me, me, me. It wasn't to build for us. It was to make good for me. And that divided us in the most horrible, horrible way. To the point where today we seem to be two halves. One half is pointing at the other half and saying, I'm not playing with you, and you are just all awful. And they are pointing right back and saying, no, you are the awful ones. And if you believe it, then I don't. And a few weeks ago, as I was driving down to this rec center, as a matter of fact, I heard a song on the radio that apparently was popular a few years ago, but I missed it. But I loved the refrain of it, because what they sang was, there is no one good and there is no one bad. There is just you and me, and we just disagree. And that just struck me as being so wonderful and such a message to us today, that there is just you and me, and we're not good or bad, we just disagree. And so let us go back to where we are working for what is good for us and work through our disagreements. And we must. I loved what Dewey said over 100 years ago, that because I think it applies to all aspects of our lives, but he was talking about education, and he said, what the best parent wants for his or her child, that must the entire community want for all of its children. Anything less would be unlovely. I love that. It would be unlovely and unthinkable, and if acted upon, will surely lead to the destruction of our democracy. So what do we do? What can you and I do to make sure that this gift of this country gets handed on in absolute wonderful condition to future generations? When the Norwegian army fell at the beginning of World War II, they didn't last long. The officers in the Norwegian army were given the option to give themselves up, and they would be put in a prisoner of war camp in northern Norway. And my father refused to do that. And so instead he went underground and joined the military organization's resistance movement. And for a while he ended up heading that organization until he was captured and sent to a Nazi camp in Poland. My mother was left having in her possession very important maps, lists of names where they were safe to work with, names and places of safety houses where they could put people that were fleeing for their lives. And she needed to get all of those papers to the people who carried on after my father. She also knew that whenever she went through a Nazi checkpoint, she would be stopped and checked because of her attachment to my father. Now, I was, according to my mother, an absolutely adorable baby. I also loved people. But whenever I saw a Nazi uniform, I would hit the high C. And also, according to my mother, That was not a pretty sound. So my mother decided that she was going to smuggle all of the papers that she had one by one in my diapers. And she was right. At every checkpoint, she was stopped and body searched. The soldiers would remove me from my baby carriage, which was most thoroughly searched, and the soldiers would be holding me. And there was no Gucci, Gucci, goo, cute baby, because I was screaming. With the result that they were holding me like this and couldn't wait to hand me back to my mother. And thus, my mother smuggled all the papers to safety, and thus ended my career as a spy. But as an adult, I asked my mother what had gone through her mind as she decided to put both of our lives on the line, because there is zero question that had we been discovered, we would have been shot right there and then. And she said something that has become very significant to me. She said it was urgent. It was vitally important. And we were the ones who could do it. I'm going to say that again. It was urgent. It was vitally important. And we were the ones who could do it. And you and I, even now at this stage of life, are given opportunities to be involved with things. And that has been my guide in my life. Is it urgent? Is it really important what I'm being asked to be involved with? And am I the one who should be involved and can do something about this? Well, I think that there absolutely is something that all of us can do that is urgent and vitally important, and that is to ensure that this remains the land of bubblegum. And to me, the best hope that we have for that is that we turn to the children. I think that for most of us, if we looked at each other and said, naughty, naughty, we shouldn't be doing this or that, it won't have a whole lot of impact. But with the children, we absolutely have impact. And they are 50% of our day-to-day, but they are 100% of our future. They are 100% the ones that will determine what this land will be like for the future generations. And they are the ones that we need to influence and impact and have them get back to, that they are working for us, for what is good for us, what makes this the land where dreams can come true and where the most wonderful things can happen. Some years ago, I met a very young lady at a school, and I agree with her. At that time, our governor was holding a press conference at one of our elementary schools, and he had invited me to come and be part of that. And so as I came right after school was out, up the stairs to that school, I noticed a small group of children sitting there, and I assumed that they were waiting for a carpool mom or dad. As I came up the steps, one of the young girls jumped up, and she had a most expectant look on her face as she said, "Are you the governor?" And I said, no, I'm not. She said, do you work for the governor? And I said, no, I do not. I work for you. And now I could hear the wheels spinning in her head as she was contemplating how she had become an employer. So I said, I am on the school board and I work my very hardest to make sure that you get the very best education possible. She didn't hesitate for a second as she gave me $1 million smile and said, well then, that's better than being the governor. And yes, it is. Anytime we can touch the life of a child for the better, it is the best thing that we could possibly be doing with our time at that particular moment. I remember an awful moment that I had at a school where I had been asked to come and speak at their assembly. And I had been asked to speak or to tell a story about a gift of an apple that took place in my family. And not an apple, an orange. And the principal of that school, and that school had its main population below poverty line. And so she had bought several cases of oranges to give an orange to every child after my speech. And in my close proximity, there was a young boy standing, and somehow he was missed, and he wasn't given an orange. And he did not yell, he did not scream, he did not go, hey, me. No, he stood there, and I will never forget his body language, because it was so lonely and so defeated. And if I hadn't been so close to him, I wouldn't even have heard him as he said, this is still hard for me. I am here too. I am here too. It was very obvious to me that there stood a young man who was used to being left out, who was used to not having. And as he was looking around and everybody else got one, he was just ever so softly and quietly saying, I am here too. Well, I want you to know that what I have learned, unbelievable as it seemed to me at the time when I was learning it, that in this wonderful place of Provo, in this wonderful state of Utah, we have lots and lots of children who in their hearts are saying, I am here too. We have children who are used to just being yelled at. We have children in our midst that don't remember the last time they were hugged, and who never ever did have a bedtime story read to them. Those children pass us in the hallways of our churches. They play in our neighborhood. We pass them on the road when we are out and about. And we have an opportunity to convey to them, in whatever means available to us at those particular encounters, to convey to that child that they do matter, that they are special, that they are worth. And I think that that is our hope for passing on this land of bubblegum to future generations, is to convey our message of love to the children that come our way. I will tell you that it may seem like very small things we're doing, but I was given a compliment that is the best compliment I have ever been given. And it came during an election campaign when a woman called me, and bless her heart, she didn't even realize that she was not in my district, so she couldn't vote for me. But she was calling to tell me that she was going to. And the reason that she was going to vote for me was that her son, who was attending our alternative high school, her son, who had encountered a lot of hardships and difficulties in his life, had said to his mom, "Vote for that lady with the accent. She is good folk. She stands up for us kids." Oh, I treasure that statement. He didn't know my name even. I didn't know his. I don't know who he was. But he was telling his mom to vote for me because he knew that one thing about me, and that was that I cared about him. And that is the message that you and I can convey to the children in our community, is that they matter to us. In my neighborhood, the house next to me, as a matter of fact, some years ago, a family from Tonga moved in. And I had very little interaction with that family because of language barriers. But one day, well, their young son, when he started kindergarten, was learning English. And he began coming over and ringing my doorbell, I thought to insult me, because he would come and so cheerful ask if my son could play. That was my husband he was referring to. My husband loved that boy. But one day as I went out for a walk, I heard light footsteps coming running behind me. And all of a sudden there was a little hand in mine. And he said with great confidence, "I'll go with you." And before I could even answer, he asked the million-dollar question, "And where are we going?" I thought a lot about that boy and about what took place on that day. The absolute trust that he had as he took my hand and said, "I will go with you." And the absolute confidence that he had that wherever I was taking the two of us was going to be to an absolutely good place where both of us would enjoy being. That cemented up for me the power and the influence that we have with the next generations. They do trust us, our children do, because we are the adults. We are the safe points in their lives. They trust us. They will put their hands in ours. and say, I will go with you. And they have confidence until we break it. They have the confidence that we will take them to good places where in the future all of us will love to be. That seems like a formidable task for you and me, to try to change the world by, in our little corner of it, influence the next generations, influencing the children, showing them what love can do, because that is ultimately the example that was set by the founding fathers of this country. And I learned about the power of that love on a Christmas Eve when I was a very young girl. My grandparents, as I told you, had a home about half an hour outside of Bergen, and they had a very large property. And from a hill on that property, you had a perfect view over the ocean. And at that time, Norway had the largest merchant fleet in the world. And every ship that was going into the Bergen harbor was visible from my grandparents' property. So the Nazi soldiers wanted it. And they confiscated half of the property of my grandparents. And they put up a barbed wire fence, which was patrolled 24/7 by German soldiers. And then they built bunkers in the hill because that's where they had the view over the ocean. One of the soldiers that patrolled there had been an opera singer before the war, and he would sing when he patrolled. And I will just tell you, it was beautiful. But I had been taught, I think from the moment I arrived as Bombardine on that bombing night, to hate Germans and everything German. I was told, you don't look at them, you don't talk to them, you certainly don't go near them, you pretend like they aren't here. And that I grew up with. And then there was a Christmas Eve on the last Christmas of the war, that my grandmother and I were the ones that were together and celebrating Christmas. And that is Christmas Eve in Norway. And we were sitting down to eat our Christmas dinner when we could hear from the outside that the opera singer soldier was on duty and he was singing out there. And something very strange happened. My grandmother didn't say anything to me. She just signaled that I should come with her. And we walked outside. And she told me to remain on her back stairs as she walked up the hill to the barbed wire fence. And there, she stretched out her arm and took the hand of that German soldier. And then they sang together. He in German, she in Norwegian, and my grandmother also had a beautiful voice. And it was gorgeous as those two sang, Silent Night, Holy Night. And when they had finished singing, she came back through the snow to me, and she didn't explain or say anything. And I was totally bewildered at what I had seen. My grandmother had not only gone up to a German, but she had touched him. She had held his hand, and she had sung with him. And it was years before I fully realized what I had observed that night. Two mortal enemies in war. Had it been required of them, I am quite certain that they both would have taken each other's lives. But at that moment, on that Christmas Eve, when they were both celebrating the fact that the Savior had arrived in this world and that he was born not just for the Norwegians, but for the Germans and for all of us in this world, he came. And that, for that moment, united totally those two enemies. And I testify to you that what I saw that night illustrated was that the love of our Creator Father that he sent with his Son into the world on that day that he arrived for all of us. That love has a power in it that can overcome everything ugly, bad, and evil. That power is stronger than anything. That is the power that can unite people, no matter how much they may disagree on trifling matters. That is the love that we need to show, to demonstrate, to exemplify in all of our dealings with every child that comes in contact with us. I love St. Francis of Assisi, who said, at all times and in all places, preach the gospel. If necessary, use words. That is the power that you and I have. That is what makes our task not formidable, but a privilege and a blessing and easy, that we can demonstrate and pass on that love that was sent into the world to, yes, to all the adults that come our way too, but most particularly to the young ones, to the ones who are 100% of our future, because we want to make sure, and that is one way to make sure, that this land of bubblegum remains a land of bubblegum, remains the land where everyone's dreams can come true and where good things will perpetually happen. We can do it, and I hope that we will do it. And we can make sure that that gift is being passed on. And it has been a privilege to be with you here today, and I am grateful for each one of you and how you make this such a wonderful place to be, and how you have certainly been part of the feast that I have been glorying in so many years. Thank you so much. And I was told that we could take questions if you have any. We have got 2.5 minutes, maybe 4. Yeah.
I think you should tell us. Oh, thank you. I would love to have you tell us a little bit about your experience and just your history a little bit. Tell us a little bit more about yourself as far as what you've done since you've been here in America.
Oh, I think that Margine pretty well covered it. I have been incredibly blessed, and I see as part of the pioneer heritage that I talked a little bit about, because I think that that produced some generations of totally remarkable people. And to me, it has been incredibly so that I am LDS and was converted to the church by missionaries that were in Norway. And my family did not like that I joined that church. And so really the option that was left for me was to come here. But that would have seemed absolutely impossible. And I have to say that the parents of that missionary who first knocked on my door, they had only been married. They were essentially newlyweds. They just, both of them had lost their spouses. And my missionary belonged to Daddy Allred, but Mom Allred, she started sending me letters in Norway, and it blew my mind because she didn't know me. She didn't know much about me at all, other than that her son wrote to her and said, I am teaching the gospel to a girl and she's really having trouble because of that. And so now, lo and behold, I get this letter from this lady in the United States of Bubblegum, who signs her letter, "Your American mom." I just couldn't even fathom that until I started through her first to learn about that love that I had not seen, the love that I talked about from the Christmas Eve with my grandmother singing. But I saw that love in real life. I saw it exemplified. And they taught me an awful lot through that love. And they sponsored me over here. Was totally amazing to me. They didn't have a lot of worldly goods. And it was years later that I found out that the one thing that they owned, which was their little house, they had put up as collateral to sponsor me here. So for 7 years, they had not been able to do anything with their house, just for in case that I should go on a rampage and cause a lot of damage in this country, in which case they would have had to pay for it. But they just did that for me. And my daughter that's here with me today, you wouldn't ever want to say to her that Mom and Dad Allred, who took me in and gave me the most wonderful start in this country, that they are not her grandparents. because they are more her grandparents than any of the bloodline ones that she had. And they, both of them, descendants of the best of Mormon pioneers, set my direction for my adult life and has set the direction for my daughter. And I am forever grateful. And that really, Sylvia, has been the impetus, the engine, the motor for my life, is that I have been overwhelmed by the love and the blessings that has been given to me, that I have felt very strongly that I needed to do absolutely everything that I could do to, in some small measure, give back and bless other lives for what I had been given. And as I stated, for me, that has become children and education, and in trying to influence the next generation. And that's the same thing that I hope that you will take every opportunity to actively think about the difference that a smile may make to a child, a hug, a question, how are you doing? Any which way that we can let them know that we care, transfer to them the feelings of love that we have been blessed with. Does that answer enough?
Mossi, we
Yeah.
have a comment from Jenny, who's been watching from home. She says, please thank this amazing lady for sharing her experiences and her views. Truly inspiring. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jenny.
Oh, I hate to do so. I guess it is time to draw this to a close. Mossi, we are so grateful for your willingness to be here with us today and to share your story and your life and enhance our lives, because you were willing to do that. Thank you so very, very much. I can tell you that, as we found out today, Mossi is a wonderful speaker, but I guarantee that Mossi is someone who walks the talk and always has. Thank you, dear friend. Love you.
Thank you, I love you.
Thanks to all of you for being here. We hope you will come back tomorrow to enjoy our Wednesday classes. Thank you.